The quiet hum of domestic bliss can be a deceptive sound, masking the silent, corrosive rot of betrayal festering beneath the surface. It was in the dead of night, in the deceptive stillness before dawn, that the first tremor of my perfectly constructed world began to shake, heralded by a sterile digital chime. The notification pinged on my phone, jolting me from the restless sleep that had become my norm. Another security alert from the company servers. I groaned, sliding my legs out of bed carefully to avoid waking Evelyn. The hardwood floor felt cold against my bare feet as I padded to my home office. 38 years old, and I was still jumping at every cybersecurity alert like some rookie analyst fresh out of Tech Academy. But that's precisely what kept our logistics firm's intricate systems secure. My near-paranoid vigilance, my unyielding obsession with the myriad digital threats lurking in every shadow of our sprawling network infrastructure. I glanced back at our bedroom door, where Evelyn slept peacefully. Her auburn hair spread across the pillow like spilled wine, a rich, dark cascade. 6 years of marriage, and she still looked like the captivating freelance UX designer who'd first drawn me in at that bustling tech conference in the heart of the Windy City metropolis. Even in the depths of slumber, she maintained that graceful composure that had been her most immediate allure. Down the hall, our daughter Chloe breathed softly in her princess-themed bedroom, clutching her beloved plush owl, Pounce. At 6 years of age, she was my entire world, bright, fiercely curious, with Evelyn's enchanting green eyes and my own stubborn streak, a delightful combination. The owl had been her constant companion since she was 3, particularly after that terrifying incident at the bustling Meadowlark Mall when she'd wandered off, vanishing into the throng of shoppers. I'd found her that day, sitting by the cascading fountain, tears streaming down her tiny face, Pounce pressed tight against her chest. "Daddy, I got lost," she'd whispered, and something deep within my chest had fractured wide open. That very night, driven by a father's fierce, protective instinct and my extensive background in child safety systems development, I'd meticulously embedded a tiny GPS tracker inside Pound's soft stuffing. "I'll always know where you are, sweetheart," I'd promised her, showing her the little app on my phone with its friendly, reassuring blinking. She giggled and hugged me tight, and for a fleeting moment, I'd felt like the hero fathers are supposed to be. The security alert turned out to be another false alarm, merely a routine backup process, triggering our overly sensitive monitoring system. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting my tired face, and checked the tracking app out of habit. It was something I did perhaps once a year just to ensure the tiny device still functioned, a quick digital health check. The app opened to show Pounce location history, and I froze. Multiple visits to the opulent Azure Towers on Riverbend Lane, a place synonymous with exclusivity and high net worth individuals. Consistent brief, but consistent durations, always recurring in the late afternoon. Always on Thursdays. I stared at the screen, my rational mind scrambling desperately for plausible explanations. Perhaps Chloe had daycare field trips that took her to this affluent neighborhood. Maybe Evelyn took her to visit a friend residing in such a lavish complex. But as I scrolled through the meticulously logged data, a chilling pattern emerged that made my stomach clench like a fist. 5 consecutive Thursdays, the exact same location, the identical duration. And according to Evelyn's meticulously shared digital calendar, those were the precise times she'd marked as mom-daughter bonding time. I sat in my office chair, the rich leather creaking softly in the pre-dawn silence, staring at that damning little dot on the map. My hands trembled almost imperceptibly as I zoomed in, studying the satellite view of the luxury complex. High-end apartments, The kind that came with bespoke concierge services and residents who drove cars worth more than most people's annual salaries. The kind of place where a senior IT director, someone like Marcus Thorne, might reside. Marcus Thorne's face, my colleague, my supposed friend, the man I'd trusted implicitly with sensitive database access just weeks prior, flashed through my mind. Tall, effortlessly charming, with distinguished silver hair and the kind of self-assured confidence that made him remarkably popular at all our company mixers. He'd always been conspicuously friendly with Evelyn at corporate events, complimenting her innovative design work, making her laugh with his witty stories. But surely not. Surely my wife of 6 years, the devoted mother of my cherished child, wouldn't. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically, to dismiss the insidious tendrils of suspicion. There had to be an innocent explanation, a simple oversight, a misunderstanding. Evelyn was utterly devoted to our family. She worked diligently from home, took meticulous care of Chloe, and supported my demanding career without a single complaint. She wasn't the type to. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was from Evelyn. Can't sleep either. Miss you. Come back to bed. I stared at the heart emoji, that seemingly innocuous little digital symbol that once would have brought a genuine smile to my face, a warmth to my chest. Now it felt like a deceitful lie, a cruel mockery of everything I held dear. Like everything else in my meticulously constructed life, it felt hollow and fraudulent. I typed back, just checking some work stuff. Be there soon. But I didn't go back to bed. I sat rooted in that chair until the first pale light of dawn crept through the windows, systematically studying the GPS data, memorizing every single timestamp, every precise location, every damning piece of evidence that screamed that my world was built on a foundation of elaborate deception. When Evelyn appeared in the doorway, as the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, already dressed in her yoga clothes, she looked like an angel, a vision of domestic serenity. "You've been up all night again," she said, her brow furrowed with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Miles, you're going to exhaust yourself." "Just some security protocols," I replied, closing the laptop quickly, my movements precise and deliberate. "How did you sleep?" "Good. Chloe's asking for pancakes again." She moved behind my chair, her hands settling gently on my shoulders, beginning one of those familiar massages that usually melted away my stress, leaving me feeling relaxed and cherished. "You're so tense. Maybe you should take a day off." Her touch, once my sanctuary, a comforting embrace that dissolved all worries, now felt tainted, like an insidious form of manipulation. I forced myself not to flinch away, to maintain the facade. "Maybe. Hey, what's on your schedule today?" "Oh, the usual. Might take Chloe to the park after lunch. She's been cooped up all week with this rain." Evelyn's voice was casual, almost too casual. "Practiced." "What?" "Just wondering. I might leave work early, spend some time with you both." Something flickered across her face. Was it a fleeting hint of panic, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes? "That would be lovely. But didn't you say you had that security audit today?" I had mentioned that yesterday in passing, a casual remark, but it was Tuesday, not Thursday. Thursday, the day of their clandestine meetings, was still 2 days away. "Right," I said, forcing a casual tone. "I forgot." She kissed the top of my head, a gentle, familiar gesture. My absent-minded genius. "Come on, let's get breakfast started before Princess Chloe becomes Princess Grumpy." As she left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall, I reopened the laptop and created a new, ominously blank folder on my desktop. I named it Project Recovery, because if my worst fears were indeed true, I was going to need every ounce of my technical expertise, not just to recover my daughter's cherished toy, but to recover to reclaim my entire life. Thursday arrived like a preordained sentencing, an inescapable judgment. I sat in my car across from Chloe's daycare in the early afternoon, my laptop balanced precariously on my knees, the tracking app refreshing with maddening regularity every 30 seconds. My hands felt clammy against the steering wheel as I watched other parents, seemingly content and oblivious, pick up their children. Normal families living what appeared to be normal lives, utterly unaware that one of their own was potentially falling apart in this very parking lot, his world crumbling silently. Shortly after, Evelyn's silver sedan pulled up to the daycare entrance. I slumped lower in my seat, my gaze fixed through the windshield as she emerged, looking radiant in a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary, a painful reminder of happier times. She moved with a practiced purpose, checking her phone twice, a nervous habit, before disappearing into the building. A few moments later, she reappeared with Chloe, who clutched Pounce tight against her chest, her small face alight with childish innocence. They walked to the car, Evelyn's hand gentle and guiding on our daughter's back as she helped her into the car's seat. From this distance, they appeared to be the perfect mother and child, a picture of domestic harmony. And for a fleeting, agonizing moment, I wondered if I was losing my mind, if this was all a terrible misinterpretation, a descent into irrational paranoia. Maybe I'd misread the GPS data. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything, a simple, logical reason that would dissolve my growing dread. Then Evelyn's car turned left instead of right, away from our house, away from the park she'd mentioned, toward the exclusive, wealthy district across town. I followed at a careful distance, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom. The tracking app confirmed what my eyes already knew. Pounce was moving inexorably toward the Azure Towers on Riverbend Lane. The complex was even more impressive in person, a towering testament to urban opulence. Glass and steel towers rose majestically against the gray sky, complemented by meticulously manicured gardens and a grand circular drive lined with gleaming luxury vehicles. I parked across the street, a silent observer, and watched Evelyn's sedan disappear into the underground garage. My phone buzzed with a new alert. The tracking app pinpointed Pounce's location, Building C, approximate floor 15 to 17. I pulled up the company directory on my laptop. Marcus Thorne's emergency contact information was still in my access folder, remnants from when I'd helped set up the new security protocols just weeks prior. His registered address, the Azure Towers on Riverbend Lane, Building C, Unit 1547, 15th floor. The world seemed to tilt sideways, my equilibrium shattering. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, fighting the overwhelming urge to storm into that building, to confront them both in a furious explosion of raw emotion. But I was a systems engineer trained to gather cold, hard data before drawing any conclusions. I needed irrefutable proof, not mere assumptions fueled by suspicion. I needed to know precisely what was unfolding in Marcus Thorne's penthouse suite while my daughter played innocently with her toy. After a seemingly interminable wait, Evelyn's car finally emerged from the garage. I followed them back toward town, maintaining a careful, almost clinical distance, my mind racing through a dizzying array of horrifying possibilities. When they stopped at the local ice cream parlor near our house, a place of innocent childhood pleasures, I drove past and headed home. By the time they returned some time later, I was at my desk, meticulously engaged in what appeared to be routine server maintenance. In reality, I was upgrading Pounce's tracking device, integrating additional, advanced capabilities I'd been developing for a child safety project before I'd left the public sector for the corporate world. "Daddy," Chloe burst into my office, a smear of strawberry ice cream still adorning her mouth. "We want to get strawberry cones. Did you have fun with Mommy?" I asked, lifting her gently onto my lap, my voice carefully neutral despite the storm raging within me. "Uh-huh. We visited her friend, and I played with Pounce in a big room with lots of windows. There were airplanes outside." My blood turned to ice. Marcus Thorne's apartment was indeed on the 15th floor, boasting expansive views of the airport approach pattern. "That sounds exciting, sweetheart. Did Mommy's friend have a nice apartment?" "It was really big, and he had a pool table, but Mommy said I couldn't play with it." Chloe's eyes were wide with the unadulterated wonder only 6-year-olds could feel about adult spaces. "He made juice for Mommy, but it was grown-up juice that smelled funny. Alcohol. In the middle of the afternoon, while my daughter, my innocent child, was present." "Did you like Mommy's friend?" I asked, maintaining my voice's careful neutrality, pushing down the rising tide of disgust. Chloe scrunched up her nose, a tiny gesture of distaste. "He was okay. He had silver hair like Grandpa, but he was different. He kept looking at Mommy in a weird way, and he asked me to play in the other room a lot." I sat her down gently, my hands almost imperceptibly shaking. "Why don't you go wash your hands for dinner?" "Okay, Daddy. Can Pounce come to dinner, too?" "Of course, sweetheart." After she left, her innocent footsteps echoing down the hall, I reopened my laptop and accessed the company's internal systems. Marcus Thorne had requested extended database access weeks prior, citing a bogus security audit. I'd approved it myself, trusting a colleague's word without question, a trust now revealed as spectacularly misplaced. Now, with a cold, analytical fury, I ran a detailed log analysis, meticulously tracking every query Marcus had made against our sensitive servers. What I found made my stomach plummet into my shoes, a sickening descent into absolute horror. Customer shipping manifests, proprietary financial records, confidential route optimization data, highly sensitive contract details with our biggest clients. Everything necessary to systematically undercut our company's competitive advantages. Everything that would be worth millions, perhaps even tens of millions, to our predatory competitors. I pulled up Marcus Thorne's professional dossier, cross-referencing it with the precise timeline of his database access. His queries intensified on the very same days Pounce GPS showed visits to his apartment. The same days Evelyn had meticulously marked mom time on her calendar. The pattern was glaringly clear, coldly methodical, and utterly devastating. My wife wasn't just having an illicit affair. She was actively providing cover for an elaborate corporate espionage scheme, using our unsuspecting daughter as an unwitting accomplice, a human shield, while she passed along critical access credentials or highly sensitive information to a man who was systematically plundering the very company I'd spent years dedicated to protecting. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under the sudden shift of my weight, my hands shaking with a rage so pure it felt like a searing electrical current coursing through my veins. All those late nights, I'd spent fortifying our digital defenses, building an impenetrable fortress against external threats. And the real, most insidious threat had been sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, kissing me good night while she meticulously planned my destruction. But I wasn't the same man who had discovered his daughter's toy in the wrong place just days earlier. That man had been trusting, perhaps naive, desperately willing to assume the best about the people he loved. This man, the one sitting in this chair, staring at irrefutable evidence of betrayal, so complete it stole his very breath away. This man was going to make them both pay for every single lie, every insidious manipulation, every moment they'd shamelessly used my innocent child as a shield for their contemptible crimes. I opened a new, secure folder on my laptop and began meticulously downloading Marcus Thorne's complete database access logs. If they wanted to play dangerous games with corporate espionage, they were about to learn firsthand what a real cybersecurity expert could do when he stopped being the good guy. The basement of our house housed a meticulously organized workbench where I'd been tinkering with upgraded tracking devices for the child safety contract I'd reluctantly abandoned when I took the corporate job. Tonight, fueled by a simmering, cold fury, I was going back to work. Pounce was about to become the most sophisticated surveillance device ever disguised as a child's cherished toy. The new tracking device I installed in Pounce was a masterpiece of miniaturization, a triumph of engineering. It boasted advanced GPS tracking capabilities, crystal clear audio recording functionality, and real-time data transmission, all cunningly hidden within electronics no bigger than 2 stacked quarters. As I carefully stitched the owl seam closed, my hands were surprisingly steady despite the inferno of fury burning in my chest, a testament to my focused resolve. Chloe never suspected anything when I returned her beloved companion the next morning. "Pounce feels different," she said, hugging the owl tight, a small frown of innocent confusion on her face. "I cleaned him up for you," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like a grotesque mask. "He was getting a little dusty." "Thank you, Daddy," Chloe murmured, then, with childish solemnity, added, "Pounce says he loves you, too." If only she knew that Pounce was about to become my most crucial spy, a silent infiltrator deep within enemy territory. Thursday arrived again, shrouded in the grim determination of my purpose. I was ready. In the early afternoon, I was strategically positioned in the parking lot of a local coffee shop, affording me clear sight lines to Marcus Thorne's imposing apartment building. My laptop displayed multiple carefully arranged windows, the GPS tracker showing Pounce's precise location, a live audio recording interface, and a sophisticated database monitoring system meticulously tracking any and all access to our company servers. A little after 3 o'clock, Evelyn's sedan disappeared into the underground garage. Moments later, Pounce's signal confirmed arrival at the 15th floor. A minute later, I activated the audio recording function. What I heard in the next 40 minutes would have utterly destroyed a weaker man, shattering his very soul. "Can't keep doing this forever." Evelyn's voice came through crystal clear, tinged with a nervous edge. "Miles is getting suspicious about something. Yesterday, he asked too many questions about my schedule." "Relax, gorgeous." Marcus's voice was smooth, confident, dripping with condescension. "Your husband's a tech nerd, not a detective. As long as you keep playing the devoted wife, he'll never figure it out." "But what if? What if nothing? We've been planning this for months, Evelyn. A few more weeks, and I'll have everything we need to start our own company. Your dear husband's impenetrable security protocols are about to make us very wealthy." I gripped the steering wheel so hard, I thought the plastic might crack under the pressure, my knuckles white. "I just hate lying to Chloe," Evelyn said, a faint tremor in her voice. She asked questions about why we come here. "Kids forget everything." Marcus scoffed, his tone dismissive. "Besides, once we're set up in California, you can tell her whatever story you want about why Daddy isn't coming with us." California. They were planning to take my daughter across the entire country, severing her connection to me completely. She adores him, Marcus. This is going to devastate her. She'll get over it. Kids are resilient, and I'll be a good stepfather, better than her biological father who works endless hours a day and constantly ignores his family. "He doesn't ignore us," Evelyn said, and for a fleeting moment, I heard something akin to guilt, a faint spark of conscience in her voice. "Really? When's the last time he took you on a real vacation? When's the last time he surprised you with something romantic? When's the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of just a mother and housekeeper?" Silence. A heavy, damning silence. That's what I thought. Marcus continued, pressing his advantage. Miles is a good provider, I'll give him that. But he's boring, predictable. You deserve better than a man who gets excited about server configurations. Stop it, Evelyn said, but her voice was weak, lacking conviction. I know you're right, but he's still what? The father of your child? That's all he is now, Evelyn. A sperm donor and a paycheck. You said it yourself. You haven't felt anything real for him in years. I closed my eyes, fighting the overwhelming urge to vomit, a bitter taste rising in my throat. The access codes you got me weeks prior were perfect. Marcus continued, oblivious to my silent agony. I was able to download the entire customer database without triggering any security alerts. Your husband's own credentials used against him. It's poetic justice, really. How much more do you need? Just the route optimization algorithms and the supplier contracts. Once I have those, we'll have everything necessary to destroy his company from the inside. Our new firm will be perfectly positioned to steal every major client they have. And you're sure this won't trace back to us? Marcus laughed, a smug, contemptuous sound. Baby, your husband taught me everything I know about covering digital tracks. He's about to be destroyed by his own expertise. There was a pause, then the distinct sound of movement, a rustling of clothes. When Evelyn spoke again, her voice was breathless, hinting at something far more intimate. Where's Chloe? Playing in the guest room with her owl. Don't worry, she can't hear anything from there. What followed were sounds that confirmed my absolute worst fears about their relationship, an intimate betrayal layered over the corporate one. For over 20 minutes, I listened to my wife systematically betray me in ways that went far beyond mere corporate espionage. When their intimate encounter ended, their conversation resumed, a chilling casualness to their voices. I sometimes feel guilty, Evelyn said, a faint whisper of remorse. Miles is not a bad man. He loves Chloe so much. Guilty enough to stop? Marcus's voice was amused, mocking. No, I can't go back to that life. But I wish there was a way to do this without destroying him completely. There isn't. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Besides, he'll survive. Men like your husband always land on their feet. They find some other woman to take care of them and bore to death. What about custody? He'll fight for Chloe. Let him try. By the time our lawyers are finished, he'll be facing criminal charges for corporate theft. Hard to get custody when you're in federal prison, wouldn't you say? Criminal charges? Evelyn's voice was laced with a dawning horror. The beauty of using his own credentials is that all the evidence points directly to him. I've been very careful to make sure the data trail leads straight to Miles's access logs. When the theft is discovered, he'll be the prime suspect. But that's not justice. Absolutely it is. He's been hoarding those algorithms and client lists for years, keeping all the profits for himself instead of sharing them with the people who actually do the work. I'm just redistributing the wealth more fairly. I turned off the audio recording, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and sat in my car, shaking with a rage so complete it felt like a religious experience, an almost divine revelation of pure, destructive fury. They weren't just destroying my marriage, my family, my emotional well-being. They were meticulously planning to frame me for their despicable crimes, to steal my daughter, to rip her from my life, and leave me to face federal charges for corporate espionage. But they made one crucial, fatal mistake. They'd forgotten that I was the very architect of our company's security systems. Every intricate algorithm, every robust protocol, every subtle digital footprint they thought would protect their nefarious activities. I had created all of it. And what I'd created, I could undeniably, irrevocably manipulate. I opened my laptop and began typing, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a terrifying precision. If Marcus Thorne wanted to play dangerous games with digital evidence, he was about to learn firsthand what happened when you challenged a man who'd spent 15 years protecting complex systems from people exactly like him. By the time I was finished, they wouldn't just lose everything they'd stolen. They'd lose everything they'd ever had. That night, while Evelyn slept peacefully beside me, a deceptive picture of serenity, I worked in my basement until the first faint streaks of dawn appeared. The recording from Pounds played on a continuous loop through my headphones, a soundtrack to my meticulously crafted digital trap. Marcus Thorne believed himself to be clever, a master manipulator, using my credentials to access sensitive data. What he failed to realize was that every security system I'd ever built included hidden monitoring protocols, obscure backdoors known only to me, expressly designed to catch precisely this kind of insidious inside threat. I'd been unknowingly watching his every move for weeks, documenting his digital footprints without realizing the magnitude of his true objective. Now, with the cold clarity of a calculated revenge, it was time to turn the tables, to set the ultimate trap. First, I created a series of honeypot databases, meticulously engineered fake repositories filled with tempting but utterly worthless information. To Marcus's untrained, avaricious eye, they would appear to contain our most valuable trade secrets, the crown jewels of our company. In reality, they were digital landmines, rigged to explode with a deluge of incriminating evidence the very moment he attempted to download their contents. Second, I subtly modified the access logs he believed he was so expertly manipulating. Instead of pointing to my credentials, the meticulously altered evidence trail would lead directly back to his personal devices, his home network, his own unique digital fingerprints. Third, and most importantly, I prepared the nuclear option. Hidden within Marcus's future downloads would be a sophisticated tracking virus, a digital phantom, one that would not only continuously monitor his activities, but also create an unbreakable chain of evidence, definitively linking him to a massive corporate espionage operation spanning multiple, unsuspecting companies. The virus would lie dormant, silently awaiting its command until activated. Then, it would burst into life like a digital cancer, aggressively documenting every single crime he'd committed and preparing to transmit that irrefutable evidence directly to federal cyber intelligence investigators. But I wasn't finished. If Marcus and Evelyn desired to destroy my life, I was going to ensure they understood the true, crushing cost of that heinous decision. I accessed Evelyn's laptop while she slept, her breathing shallow, and even implanting tracking software that would monitor every keystroke, every sent email, every digital conversation. I needed to understand the full, terrifying scope of their conspiracy, to map every ally, to identify every single weakness. What I found was infinitely worse than I'd imagined, a deeper level of insidious betrayal. Evelyn hadn't just provided access codes. She'd been surreptitiously photographing sensitive documents from my home office, copying confidential files from my personal laptop, even secretly recording conversations during family dinners when I innocently discussed work challenges. Every intimate moment of our marriage, every shared confidence, had been cynically weaponized against me. But the most damaging evidence lay hidden in her email drafts folder, detailed, chillingly precise plans for their new life in California, complete with meticulously researched bank accounts, potential rental properties, and shocking custody arrangements that chillingly assumed I'd be serving federal prison time. They'd been planning this elaborate scheme for several months, an agonizing stretch of lies, manipulation, and calculated, systematic betrayal. I copied everything onto encrypted drives, meticulously building a comprehensive case file that would make federal prosecutors weep with unbridled joy. But I wasn't ready to involve law enforcement just yet. This was personal now, a deeply intimate act of retribution, and I wanted front row seats when their carefully constructed world imploded, when their carefully woven fabric of deceit unraveled. Friday morning, I called in sick to work, the first sick day I'd taken in several years. Evelyn seemed surprised, but strangely pleased. "You've been working too hard," she said, bringing me coffee in bed, a gesture that now felt profoundly hollow. "Maybe we should do something fun as a family this weekend." "I'd like that," I replied, studying her face, a cold detachment replacing any former affection. How had I never noticed how effortlessly she lied, how skillfully she maintained her elaborate charade? "Maybe we could go to the Northwood City Zoo. Chloe loves the owl exhibit." "That sounds perfect. I'll pack a picnic lunch." She kissed my forehead, the very same lips that had been on Marcus Thorne's body just yesterday afternoon, and I forced myself not to recoil, not to betray my inner turmoil. "Evelyn," I said as she reached the bedroom door, her hand on the doorknob, "do you ever regret anything about our marriage?" She turned, her face a mask of concerned innocence, a perfectly crafted facade. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if you're happy. Really happy. For just a fleeting moment." I saw something crack in her expression, a flicker of genuine emotion. Guilt, perhaps, or even fear. Then the mask slipped back into place flawlessly. "I'm perfectly happy, Miles. We have a beautiful daughter, a lovely home, a good life." "Why would you ask something like that?" "Just wondering. I love you, you know." "I love you too." Another lie, delivered with the practiced ease of a professional con artist. After she left for what she claimed was a grocery run, I accessed our joint bank accounts. Over the past 6 months, Evelyn had been making small but consistent transfers to an account I didn't recognize. The amounts were carefully calculated to stay below the automatic reporting thresholds, a few $100s here, a few hundred there. Never enough to trigger immediate alerts or raise red flags. In total, she'd systematically stolen nearly $24,000 from our family's savings. Money that was undoubtedly funding the California apartment she'd already secured for her new life with Marcus. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of their meticulous conspiracy, and felt something cold and utterly final settle deep in my chest. The man who'd innocently discovered his daughter's toy in the wrong place a week ago was dead, irrevocably gone. The man who'd trusted his wife's explanations and naively assumed the best about people, even those he loved, was gone forever. In his place sat someone harder, immeasurably smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that mercy, in this brutal new reality, was a luxury he could no longer afford. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the Federal Cyber Intelligence Bureau Task Force, but didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted Marcus to make his final, fatal move, to download the poison data that would seal his and Evelyn's fate. According to Evelyn's meticulously updated calendar, they had another mom-daughter bonding session scheduled for the following Thursday. That would be the day I utterly destroyed them both. But first, I was going to savor watching them believe they had one. The next Thursday arrived, gray and cold, with the kind of relentless autumn rain that made everything look bleak and unforgiving, mirroring the darkness in my soul. Perfect weather for what I had meticulously planned. I'd spent the entire week playing the role of the oblivious husband to perfection, asking about Evelyn's day, helping Chloe with her homework, even innocently suggesting we plan a family vacation for Christmas. Evelyn seemed visibly relieved by my apparent normalcy, utterly unaware that every manufactured smile, Every feigned kiss, every moment of carefully staged domesticity was being recorded and meticulously documented, building an unassailable case. In the early afternoon, I was in position across from Marcus's apartment building, my laptop displaying real-time feeds from 3 different, interconnected monitoring systems. This time, I wasn't just watching, I was actively controlling the entire operation, pulling the invisible strings of their downfall. Evelyn's sedan disappeared into the underground garage a little after 3 o'clock. Within minutes, Pound's signal confirmed they were safely ensconced in Marcus's apartment. Moments later, I triggered the trap. The honeypot database I'd meticulously created appeared to malfunction, displaying what looked like a critical system error, one that would undeniably require immediate manual intervention. The fake emergency would provide Marcus with the perfect, irresistible excuse to access our most sensitive files. Files that were actually booby-trapped with enough incriminating evidence to destroy him 10 times over. I activated Pound's audio recording and listened with chilling satisfaction as my meticulously crafted plan unfolded. "What's wrong?" Evelyn's voice was tense, laced with concern. "Some kind of system glitch at your husband's company," Marcus replied, his voice a little too eager. "Perfect timing, actually. System errors like this usually create opportunities to access data that's normally locked down. Is it safe, baby? I've been doing this for months without getting caught. Your husband's too trusting to suspect his own IT director." The distinct sound of rapid typing filled the recording as Marcus accessed his workstation. I watched on my own screen as he took the bait, hook, line, and sinker, navigating directly to the poisoned files I'd so carefully prepared for him. "Jackpot!" he exclaimed, a note of triumph in his voice. "I'm looking at their entire route optimization algorithm. This is worth millions. How long will it take to download?" "About 10 minutes. Why don't you keep me company while we wait?" What followed was audio I'd heard before, but this time I listened with cold, analytical detachment instead of shattering heartbreak. Every sound, every word, every breath was being recorded in multiple formats, redundantly backed up to secure servers, and time-stamped with a precision that would satisfy any court in the country, leaving no room for doubt. But the real show, the true grand finale, was just beginning. A little after 3:30, Marcus's download completed. The very moment his system processed the final poison file, my virus activated. I watched on my monitoring software as the digital parasite spread through Marcus's network like wildfire, relentlessly copying every file, every email, every single piece of evidence of his criminal activities. Within a startlingly short span, it had found and documented 3 separate corporate espionage operations dating back over a year, operations completely unrelated to my company. Marcus Thorne hadn't just been stealing from my company. He'd been running a systematic, multifaceted data theft operation targeting multiple, unsuspecting firms in our industry. "Something's wrong." Marcus's voice was sharp with sudden, dawning panic. "My system's running some kind of scan I didn't initiate." "What does that mean?" Evelyn's voice was tight with fear. "I don't know. It's accessing files I've never seen before, creating some kind of report." I smiled, a grim, satisfied curve of my lips, as I watched the virus complete its devastating work. In addition to meticulously documenting Marcus's crimes, it was also creating an unbreakable evidence trail, linking every piece of stolen data directly back to his personal devices, his unique digital fingerprints, ensuring his undeniable culpability. "Can you stop it?" "I'm trying, but..." Marcus's voice cut off abruptly, swallowed by a rising tide of desperation. "Marcus, what's happening?" Evelyn shrieked. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, filled with a raw, primal terror. "The system just locked me out, and there's a message on the screen. What does it say? It says game over. Evidence transmitted to Federal Cyber Intelligence Bureau Task Force. Have a nice day. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. A symphony of justice. Transmitted to who? Evelyn's voice cracked with unadulterated terror. Federal investigators. Someone's been watching us, Evelyn. Someone knows everything. I disconnected the audio feed and opened my secure email, where an automated message confirmed that a complete, comprehensive evidence package had been transmitted to the FCIB Cybercrime Division, the Department of Judicial Affairs, and the security division of my own company. 23 gigabytes of irrefutable evidence. Audio recordings, meticulous financial records, stolen files, and a complete, damning timeline of their entire conspiracy. But I wasn't finished. I activated the second phase of my plan. A comprehensive financial audit that would immediately freeze every account Marcus and Evelyn had access to, pending investigation of money laundering charges. The California apartment, the stolen savings, the clandestine payments Marcus had received from competing companies, all of it would be locked down within hours, inaccessible. Phase 3 was even more satisfying, a carefully orchestrated legal coup. I'd spent days meticulously crafting a legal brief that outlined not just their corporate crimes, but also the egregious endangerment of a minor. Using Chloe as cover for corporate espionage constituted child endangerment under federal law, a crime with mandatory minimum sentences that would ensure they both spent years in prison. My phone rang. Evelyn's number. Miles. Her voice was panicked, desperate, barely recognizable. Something's wrong. We need to come home right away. What's wrong, honey? I asked, my voice perfectly calm, deceptively soothing. I can't explain over the phone. Just, we need to talk. Of course. I'll be waiting. I hung up and sent one final decisive email. This one to the best family law attorney in the state, along with a complete package of evidence meticulously documenting Evelyn's betrayal and the severe danger she'd placed our daughter in. By the time she walked through her front door, every aspect of her life would be under a relentless federal investigation. Less than half an hour later, Evelyn's sedan pulled into our driveway. I watched from the living room window as she sat in the car for several minutes, clearly trying to compose herself, to regain her composure before facing me. When she finally emerged, Chloe clutching Pounce tightly beside her, she looked like a woman walking to her own execution, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Daddy!" Chloe ran to me, her small arms reaching up, and I scooped her up, holding her tight, cherishing her innocence. "How was your afternoon with Mommy?" "Good. We went to see her friend again, but he seemed upset about something. His computer was making weird noises." Computer problems can be frustrating, I agreed, looking directly at Evelyn, my gaze unwavering. Sometimes systems crash when people try to access files they shouldn't. Evelyn's face went stark white, drained of all color. "Why don't you go play with Pounce in your room, sweetheart?" I said to Chloe, "Mommy, and I need to talk about grown-up things." After Chloe disappeared upstairs, her light footsteps fading, Evelyn and I stood in our living room, the very same room where we'd exchanged wedding vows years prior, where we'd celebrated Chloe's first steps, where we'd built what I genuinely thought was a life together. "Miles," she began, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "I need to tell you something. I know exactly what you need to tell me." I replied, my voice steady, cold as ice. "The question is, are you going to lie to me one more time, or are you finally going to tell the truth?" She collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to build a case that's going to put both you and Marcus in federal prison for a decade or more." She looked up, tears streaming down her face, her eyes pleading. Miles, please, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been using our daughter as cover while you helped your lover steal corporate secrets. How you've been draining our bank accounts to fund your elaborate escape to California. How you plan to frame me for your crimes. You don't understand. Understand perfectly, I said, sitting across from her, my voice calm and chillingly devoid of emotion. I understand that you're a criminal who was willing to destroy your family for money. I understand that you endangered our daughter by bringing her repeatedly to your partner in crime's apartment. And I understand that in about a mere 60 minutes, FCIB agents are going to arrest both you and Marcus for federal espionage charges. Evelyn's face crumpled, her entire body seeming to shrink. What about Chloe? What about her? Did you think about her when you were planning to disappear to California? Did you think about her when you were using her favorite toy as cover for corporate theft? Did you think about her when you were planning to frame her father? I never meant for any of this to hurt her, she choked out, her voice ragged. But it did hurt her. Every lie you told, every time you put her in danger, every moment you chose Marcus Thorne over your own family. You were hurting her. The abrupt sound of car doors slamming interrupted our conversation, a stark punctuation mark to the end of our life together. Through the window, I could clearly see federal agents, their posture rigid and professional, approaching our front door. Miles, please, Evelyn whispered, her voice desperate. She's her daughter, too. Don't let them take me away from her. I looked at this woman who'd shared my bed, raised my child, and systematically, methodically destroyed everything we'd built together. Once, I'd loved her more than life itself. Now I felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction as I heard the FCIB agents climbing our front steps, their boots heavy on the wood. You took yourself away from her the moment you chose to become a criminal, I said, my voice unwavering. I'm just making sure she's safe from the consequences of your choices. The doorbell rang, a final, definitive chime. I went to answer it, leaving Evelyn sobbing inconsolably on the couch, the very same couch where we used to watch movies together, where she used to fall asleep peacefully in my arms after long days caring for our baby. Those people, the couple we once were gone now, irrevocably. In their place stood a federal criminal and the man who'd painstakingly brought her justice. When I opened the door to let the agents inside, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, a profound sense of lightness. Peace. The war was over. I'd won. The arrest was everything I'd imagined and more, a chillingly satisfying spectacle. Special Agent Eleanor Vance, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, presented her warrant with the kind of crisp professionalism that spoke to years of experience handling complex financial crimes. Behind her stood 3 other agents, including a cybercrime specialist who recognized my name from my previous, more virtuous work in public sector security. Mrs. Hollister, Agent Vance said, her voice carrying the undeniable authority of the federal government, a voice that brooked no argument. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, money laundering, and child endangerment in the commission of federal crimes. Evelyn's legs gave out, her body collapsing back onto the couch, her face a mask of utter disbelief, as if she couldn't possibly comprehend the words. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Agent Vance continued, unmoved by Evelyn's emotional breakdown, her expression impassive. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they read her rights, I went upstairs to Chloe's room. She was playing innocently with Pounce, completely unaware that her world, too, was about to change forever. Sweetheart, I said, sitting on her bed, the springs creaking softly. Some police officers are here to talk to Mommy about grown-up problems. You're going to stay with me tonight, okay? Is mommy in trouble? The question, delivered with childlike innocence, hit me like a physical blow. How do you explain to a recently turned 7-year-old that her mother is going to federal prison for a decade and a half? Yes, she is. But it's not your fault, and it's not something you did wrong. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and they have to face consequences. Will she come back? I don't know, sweetheart. But no matter what happens, I'll always be here to take care of you, always. She hugged Pounce tighter, burying her face in a soft fur. Will you tell Pounce that everything's going to be okay? Everything's going to be okay. I whispered to the owl that had started this entire nightmare, my voice thick with emotion. Daddy's going to make sure of it. Downstairs, they were placing handcuffs on Evelyn. She looked up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Miles, please don't let them take me. Think about Chloe. Think about our family. I'm thinking about our family, I replied, my voice hard, uncompromising. I'm thinking about the family you utterly destroyed when you chose to become a criminal. Agent Vance approached me as they led Evelyn toward the door, her walk unsteady. Mr. Hollister, we'll need you to come in for a debriefing tomorrow. The evidence you provided is some of the most comprehensive documentation of corporate espionage we've seen in years. I'll be there. We've also arrested Marcus Thorne at his apartment. He's claiming innocence, but the digital evidence is overwhelming. What happens now? Federal prosecution for both of them. Based on the evidence, we're looking at conspiracy charges, computer fraud, theft of trade secrets, and money laundering. With your wife's active participation in endangering a minor during the commission of federal crimes, they're facing substantial sentences each. After they left, the house suddenly quiet. I sat in my living room with Chloe, holding her close, trying to explain in the simplest terms possible why her mother wouldn't be coming home. She cried, and I held her tighter, whispering reassurances, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could truly breathe again. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if a toxic poison had been thoroughly extracted from its very walls, leaving behind a lighter, purer atmosphere. That night, after Chloe finally fell asleep, clutching Pounce, I sat in my office and began planning our new life, a future unburdened by deceit. The federal investigation would undoubtedly take months to reach its conclusion, but the outcome was now inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming, the crimes clear, the penalties severe. Evelyn and Marcus had gambled everything on a twisted scheme to destroy me and steal my company secrets. Instead, they'd unwittingly handed me the very tools to destroy them completely. But as I sat there in the silence, the weight of my actions settling upon me, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel the savage satisfaction I'd anticipated, the unbridled triumph. Instead, I felt profoundly tired, deeply sad, and strangely empty. The man I'd been before discovering Pounce tracking data was gone forever, irrevocably altered. In his place sat someone harder, more ruthless, capable of orchestrating the systematic destruction of 2 human lives without losing a single moment's sleep. I'd won the war, but victory had come at cost I was only just beginning to understand. Outside, the rain continued its gentle, mournful patter. Half a year later, I sat in federal court, watching my wife's life end in real time, a grim tableau of justice. The prosecution had built their case meticulously, using every piece of damning evidence I'd provided to construct an airtight, irrefutable narrative of betrayal, greed, and cold, calculated criminal conspiracy. Evelyn sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her once beautiful hair now lank and unwashed, her face gaunt and drawn from months in federal detention. She'd lost weight, lost her vibrant color, lost everything that had once made her radiant and captivating. Marcus Thorne sat stoically beside her, his distinguished silver hair now completely white, his expensive clothes replaced by the stark anonymity of prison garb. The man who'd once carried himself with such arrogant confidence now looked utterly broken, profoundly defeated, aged 10 years in a mere 6 months. They'd both plead not guilty, despite evidence so overwhelmingly conclusive that their own attorneys had privately advised them to accept generous plea bargains. But Marcus's ingrained arrogance and Evelyn's desperate, misguided hope had led them to roll the dice on a jury trial. It was the worst decision they could have possibly made. Assistant U.S. Attorney Selena Ramirez was a prosecutor with a formidable reputation for tackling complex financial crimes. She'd spent weeks preparing for this intricate case, and her opening statement was surgical in its precision, cutting to the very heart of the matter. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "This case is about betrayal on multiple, deeply interconnected levels. The betrayal of a sacred marriage, the betrayal of a company's fundamental trust, and most importantly, the profound betrayal of a 6-year-old child who was callously used as an unwitting accomplice in her mother's heinous crimes." She gestured to a large screen where Pounce tracking data was displayed in stark, incriminating detail. For months, these defendants shamelessly used this little girl's beloved toy as cover for a systematic, pervasive campaign of corporate espionage. While the child played innocently, believing she was spending quality time with her mother, she was actually being used as a human shield for insidious criminal activity. The jury, a diverse group of parents, looked utterly horrified, their faces etched with shock. The evidence will show that Evelyn Hollister and Marcus Thorne conspired to steal trade secrets worth millions of dollars. They drained bank accounts, manipulated complex computer systems, and planned to frame an innocent man for their crimes. But most damaging of all, they were willing to use a child, an innocent, trusting child, to accomplish their nefarious goals. Santos moved to the evidence table where dozens of exhibits were arranged with meticulous courtroom precision. You will hear recordings of the defendants shamelessly discussing their crimes. You will see financial records meticulously documenting their theft. You will review computer logs definitively proving their systematic violation of federal cybercrime statutes. She paused, letting the crushing weight of her words settle over the hushed courtroom. But most importantly, you will hear the innocent voice of a little girl describing her visits to Marcus Thorne's apartment, utterly unaware that her very presence was providing cover for grave federal crimes. The recording of Chloe describing the big room with lots of windows played through the courtroom speakers, her childish voice echoing, and several jurors visibly winced, their expressions mirroring a collective pain. When it was the defense's turn, Evelyn's attorney, Arthur Pendleton, attempted to paint her as a hapless victim of manipulation. "My client is guilty of adultery," he conceded, his voice somber. "She's guilty of making terrible choices that tragically destroyed her marriage, but she is emphatically not guilty of espionage." Evelyn Hollister is a stay-at-home mother with no technical background, no understanding of complex computer systems, no ability to mastermind the intricate crimes described by the prosecution. It was a reasonable strategy designed to evoke sympathy, but it fell apart the very moment Santos played the incriminating recordings from Pounce. Evelyn's own voice filled the courtroom. "I just hate lying to Chloe. She asks questions about why we come here." And Marcus's chilling response: "Kids forget everything. Besides, once we're set up in California, you can tell her whatever story you want about why Daddy isn't coming with us." The sound of my wife planning to systematically kidnap my daughter was devastating testimony, echoing with unspeakable cruelty. Marcus's attorney, Benjamin Albright, tried a different approach, claiming his client was being framed by a vengeful husband with sophisticated technical skills. Miles Hollister is a cybersecurity expert, Benjamin Albright argued, his voice ringing with conviction. He has the profound knowledge and the unparalleled access to manipulate digital evidence, to create false data trails, to manufacture evidence of crimes that never occurred. It was a clever theory, one that might have worked against a less prepared prosecution. Selena Ramirez destroyed it in a mere half hour, systematically dismantling his claims. She called me to the witness stand on the third day of proceedings. Walking past Evelyn's table, I caught her eye for the first time since her arrest. She mouthed the word please, a desperate, silent plea, but I looked away, my resolve unshaken. Under Santos's relentless questioning, I calmly walked the jury through the discovery of the tracking data, the meticulous installation of the upgraded surveillance equipment, and the systematic documentation of their crimes, presenting the facts with detached precision. "Mr. Hollister," Santos asked, her voice sharp and clear, "did you manipulate any of the evidence presented in this case?" "No, I did not." "Did you create false data trails or manufacture digital evidence?" "No." "Every piece of evidence presented here is authentic and unaltered. Could you have manipulated this evidence if you'd wanted to?" I paused, considering the question carefully, choosing my words with precision. "Yes, I have the technical skills to manipulate digital evidence, but that would have been unnecessary. The defendants documented their own crimes so thoroughly that manipulation would have been redundant." Arthur Pendleton cross-examined me aggressively, attempting to paint me as a controlling, emotionally distant husband who'd driven his wife to seek affection elsewhere. "Mr. Hollister, isn't it true that you were emotionally distant from your wife?" "I worked long hours to provide for my family." "If that made me distant, then yes." "Isn't it true that you neglected your wife's emotional needs?" "I love my wife. I trusted her. I believed she loved me in return. If that constitutes neglect, then I'm guilty as charged." "Isn't it true that you installed surveillance equipment in your daughter's toy without your wife's knowledge or consent?" "I installed a GPS tracker years ago after my daughter got lost in a mall. I updated that equipment when I discovered it was recording evidence of federal crimes." "So, you admit to conducting surveillance on your own family?" "I admit to protecting my daughter from being used as an accessory to federal crimes." Pendleton pressed harder, his voice rising in intensity. "Mr. Hollister, isn't this entire prosecution simply an elaborate revenge scheme by a man who couldn't accept that his wife had fallen out of love with him?" I looked directly at the jury, my gaze unwavering. If I wanted revenge, I would have handled this privately, brutally. Instead, I gathered evidence and turned it over to federal authorities because my wife and her accomplice were committing serious crimes that threaten national economic security. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. The trial lasted a fortnight. The defense presented character witnesses, questioned the admissibility of evidence with endless motions, and attempted to create reasonable doubt about their client's true intentions. None of it mattered. The jury deliberated for just a few hours on the charge of conspiracy to commit computer fraud and offense. How do you find? Guilty on the charge of theft of trade secrets? Guilty on the charge of money laundering? Guilty on the charge of child endangerment in the commission of federal crimes? Guilty. Mara collapsed when the final verdict was read, a broken figure. Marcus stared straight ahead, his face a mask of utter disbelief, as if the reality of his conviction could not penetrate his self-serving delusion. Justice Serena Hayes set sentencing for 6 weeks hence. As the courtroom emptied, Mara's eyes found mine one last time. This time, She didn't mouth any words, no desperate pleas. She just looked at me with an expression of such complete, profound defeat that for just a fleeting moment, I almost felt a pang of pity for her. But the moment passed. Justice had been served. The federal courthouse was packed on sentencing day, brimming with media and spectators. Media coverage had been extensive, a ravenous beast devouring every detail. The case had everything journalists loved: corporate espionage, marital betrayal, and the unique, captivating twist of an innocent child's toy bringing down a complex criminal conspiracy. I sat in the gallery with Chloe, who had recently turned 7 and had been in therapy for months to help her understand why Mommy was in jail. She'd brought Pounce with her, still unaware of the owl's unwitting role in exposing her mother's crimes. Justice Hayes entered the courtroom with the somber gravity befitting a federal sentencing hearing, her presence commanding. She'd reviewed hundreds of pages of pre-sentence reports, heartfelt character letters, and emotional victim impact statements. The court calls the matter of United States versus Evelyn Elizabeth Hollister and Marcus William Park, she announced, her voice ringing with authority. Evelyn stood first, flanked by her attorneys, a pale, fragile figure. Several months in federal detention had aged her dramatically, visibly eroding her vitality. The vibrant woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone hollow-eyed and utterly broken. Mrs. Hollister, Justice Hayes began, her gaze unwavering. You have been convicted of serious federal crimes that strike at the very heart of our economic security. The evidence clearly shows a systematic campaign of theft, deception, and manipulation that spanned nearly a year. She paused, consulting her notes, her expression grim. What makes your crimes particularly egregious is your willingness to use your own daughter as cover for criminal activity. The court has reviewed extensive psychological testimony about the potential long-term damage to this child, who was unknowingly made an accomplice to her mother's crimes. Evelyn began crying softly, silent tears tracing paths down her gaunt cheeks. You violated the trust of your husband, your family, and the federal systems meticulously designed to protect American businesses from exactly this kind of corporate espionage. But most damaging of all, you violated the sacred innocence of your own child. Justice Hayes leaned forward, her voice imbued with a moral weight. Mrs. Hollister, do you wish to address the court before I impose sentence? Evelyn stood shakily, her legs trembling. Your Honor, I want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my husband, to my daughter, to everyone I've hurt. I made terrible choices, and I know I have to face the consequences. But please, I'm begging you, don't separate me from my daughter for her entire childhood. She needs her mother. It was a pathetic plea delivered by a woman who had already lost everything of value. Mrs. Hollister, Justice Hayes replied, her voice firm, unsympathetic. Your daughter needed her mother to protect her, not to use her as a shield for federal crimes. The time to consider your daughter's welfare was before you chose to become a criminal. She consulted the sentencing guidelines, her eyes scanning the parameters. Taking into account the severity of your crimes, the substantial amount of financial damage caused, and the particularly aggravating factor of child endangerment, the court sentences you to a full 15 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $2.3 million. Evelyn collapsed into her chair as if she'd been physically shot, her body crumpling. Marcus Thorne's sentencing was even harsher, delivered with cold, unyielding finality. Mr. Park, Justice Hayes said, her voice stern, as the undisputed mastermind of this conspiracy, you bear primary responsibility for these heinous crimes. You manipulated a vulnerable woman, endangered a child, and attempted to steal trade secrets that could have gravely compromised American economic interests. Marcus stood stoically, his silver hair now completely white, his face devoid of emotion, a man already resigned to his fate. The court sentences you to over 2 decades in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $4.1 million and are permanently barred from working in any position that involves access to computer systems or confidential information. 22 years. Marcus Thorne would be a senior citizen upon his eventual release, if he lived that long. As the bailiffs led them away in shackles, the metallic clang echoing ominously, Evelyn turned back one last time. Her eyes found Chloe, who was coloring quietly in her seat, utterly oblivious to the fact that she had just watched her mother disappear for the next 15 years. "I love you, baby," Evelyn called out, her voice breaking, fractured by despair. Chloe looked up, a puzzled frown on her face, and waved. "Bye, Mommy. See you later." The profound innocence in those words was heartbreaking, a stark contrast to the brutal reality unfolding around her. After the sentencing, I was approached by Agent Vance, who had become something of a quiet ally, almost a friend, during the arduous months of investigation and trial preparation. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice soft and pathetic. "Empty," I admitted, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I thought I'd feel more satisfied, more triumphant." "Justice isn't about satisfaction," she replied, her gaze steady. "It's about consequences. They committed serious crimes, and now they're facing serious consequences. Your daughter is safe. Your company's secrets are protected, and 2 criminals are going to prison for a very long time. That's a victory, Miles." "I know. It's just that you loved her once." I nodded, the truth undeniable. "The hardest cases are always the ones where love gets twisted into something destructive," Agent Vance said. "But you did the right thing. Never doubt that for a second." Outside the courthouse, a persistent reporter approached me, microphone outstretched. "Mr. Hollister, how do you feel about your wife's sentence?" "I feel that justice was served," I replied, my voice calm, controlled. "My primary concern now is protecting my daughter and helping her heal from the trauma her mother caused." "Do you have any regrets about how you handled the investigation?" I thought about that question carefully, allowing myself a moment of reflection. "I regret that it was necessary," I finally said, my gaze distant. "I regret that the woman I married chose to become a criminal. But I don't regret protecting my daughter or exposing their crimes." "What's next for you and your daughter?" "We're going to build a new life, a better life, one based on truth instead of lies, built on a foundation of honesty." That night, after Chloe was asleep, her breathing soft and even, I sat in my office and opened the drawer where I'd kept all the evidence files. Hundreds of documents, thousands of emails, raw audio recordings, meticulous financial records, the complete, unvarnished documentation of how a marriage dies and a family gets systematically destroyed. I kept it all, partly for legal reasons, and partly because I couldn't quite believe it had really happened, that my life had transformed into such a bitter, complex narrative. Now it was truly over. The trials were finished, the sentences imposed, justice undeniably served. I took the files outside and burned them in a metal drum in our backyard, watching months of searing pain and profound betrayal turn to ash in the crisp autumn night, the flames licking greedily at the paper. When the last shred of paper had burned, leaving only fine, gray dust, I went back inside and found Chloe standing at the top of the stairs, clutching Pounce, her small face etched with worry. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." "Come here, sweetheart." She ran down the stairs and into my arms, a small, trusting weight. I carried her back to her room, tucked her gently into bed, and sat beside her until she fell back asleep, her fears momentarily eased. Looking at her peaceful face in the moonlight, a fragile picture of innocence, I made a silent, solemn promise. She would never know the full, horrifying extent of what her mother had done. She would never know about the recordings, the relentless surveillance, the systematic betrayal that had utterly destroyed our family. She would know that her mother made mistakes and had to go away for a while, that sometimes adults make bad choices. She would know that I would always be there, a steadfast protector, but she would never know that her beloved Pounce had been the unwitting instrument of her mother's dramatic, self-inflicted destruction. Some secrets, I realized, were truly worth keeping to safeguard the fragile innocence of a child. Epilogue. 3 years on, the conference room at Sterling and Chambers LLP was designed specifically to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling downtown of Northwood City. A polished mahogany table could seat 20, and the walls were lined with imposing legal tomes that represented decades of courtroom victories. Today, it was the setting for Evelyn's final, undisputed defeat. "Mr. Hollister," said Patricia Morrison, Evelyn's appeals attorney, her voice crisp and professional, "my client is willing to terminate all parental rights in exchange for your agreement, not to pursue additional civil damages." I sat across from her, flanked by my own capable legal team, reviewing the stark documents that would legally erase Evelyn from Chloe's life forever. 3 years had passed since the sentencing. Evelyn was serving her time at Stonehaven Correctional Facility, a federal women's prison. She'd filed appeal after appeal, each one a desperate, futile attempt to reverse her fate, all of them unsuccessful. Her conviction stood, her sentence was firm, and her prospects for early release were non-existent. Now, facing the brutal reality of missing Chloe's entire childhood, she was offering to surrender the last, tenuous connection she had to the outside world, to the daughter she had so callously used. "What does she want in return?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Just your agreement not to pursue the civil fraud case," Morrison replied, her gaze steady. "She owes substantial restitution already. Additional civil damages would be meaningless. She'll never be able to pay what she already owes. I've been considering a civil lawsuit for years, partly for financial recovery, partly to ensure that Evelyn could never profit from her sordid story through book deals or media appearances. But the truth was, I'd already recovered everything that truly mattered. My company had not only survived the data theft, but had thrived spectacularly in its aftermath. The widespread publicity surrounding the case had actually enhanced our reputation for robust security, leading to lucrative new contracts and expanded operations. Financially, I was demonstrably better off than I'd been before the betrayal. Emotionally, Chloe and I had built a rich, fulfilling new life together, stronger for what we had endured. She was now 9 years of age, bright, happy, and showed no memory of the raw trauma that had torn our family apart. She occasionally asked about her mother, but those questions had become less frequent, their emotional intensity diminishing over time. She'd started calling my girlfriend, Eliza, Mom, some months prior, and Eliza had embraced the role with genuine love and profound devotion, a true blessing. "I'll agree to her terms," I said finally, my decision firm. "But I want a complete termination of parental rights with no possibility of reversal. No contact, no visitation, no communication of any kind ever." "She understands," Morrison replied, her expression unreadable. "She also wanted me to give you this." She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Evelyn's once familiar handwriting. "I don't want it," I said, a flicker of old pain. She asked me to tell you that it's not an attempt to manipulate or contact you. She just wanted to say goodbye. I took the envelope, its weight surprisingly heavy, but didn't open it immediately. The legal proceedings took under an hour. Documents were signed, notarized, and filed with bureaucratic efficiency. With the stroke of a pen, Evelyn Hollister ceased to exist as far as the law was concerned when it came to our daughter. That evening, I sat in my study with the unopened letter. Eliza was upstairs helping Chloe with homework, their laughter drifting down the stairs like a soothing, melodic balm. This was my family now, not the broken remnants of betrayal, but something new and healthy and vibrantly real, built on a foundation of honesty and love. I almost threw the letter away without reading it, consigning it to the past. Instead, I opened it. Miles, the letter began, her handwriting surprisingly shaky. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. I know that saying I'm sorry is meaningless after everything I did to you and to Chloe, but I need you to know that I loved you both. I know that sounds impossible after what I did, but it's true. I loved you, and I destroyed that love through my own choices. I have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. I've had years to think about what I did, and I finally understand something profound. You didn't destroy our family. I did. You didn't take Chloe away from me. I threw her away when I chose Marcus over my own daughter's welfare. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that every day in this place, I think about the life I could have had if I'd been a better person. I think about the mother I could have been a Chloe if I'd chosen differently. Take care of our little girl. Tell her that her first mommy loved her very much, but that she had to go away because she made mistakes. Don't tell her the truth about what I did. Let her remember me as someone who loved her, not as the criminal I became. I hope you find happiness. I hope Eliza makes you both happy in ways I never could. You deserve that. Goodbye, Evelyn. I read the letter twice, absorbing every painful word, then walked to the fireplace and fed it to the hungry flames, watching it curl and blacken into nothingness. Some chapters of your life, I realized, deserve to end completely, irrevocably. Upstairs, I found Eliza reading to Chloe in her bedroom, their voices soft and comforting. Pound sat on a nightstand, no longer a clandestine surveillance device, but simply a beloved toy again, a symbol of childhood innocence restored. I'd removed all the electronics years ago, returning him to innocent stuffing and soft fabric. Daddy, Chloe looked up from her book, her eyes bright. Eliza's reading me the story about the princess who saves herself. That's a good story, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed, a familiar comfort. The princess is really smart, just like you, Daddy. She figures out how to escape from the bad people all by herself. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it, I replied, looking at Eliza with profound gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of her unwavering support. But sometimes you have to be brave and save yourself, Chloe insisted, her small chin jutting out in determination. You're absolutely right, sweetheart, I agreed, a smile tugging at my lips. After we tucked her in, Eliza and I walked downstairs together, our steps light. Everything okay? She asked, her voice quiet, perceptive. You seem thoughtful. Evelyn signed away her parental rights today. Eliza stopped walking, her hand gently touching my arm. How do you feel about that? Relieved, free, ready to move forward completely, without any shadow from the past. What about Chloe? Will you tell her? Someday, when she's old enough to truly understand. For now, she is everything she needs. A father who loves her, and a woman who's chosen to be her mother, truly and completely. Eliza smiled, her eyes warm with affection. I love her like she's my own, Miles. You know that. I know. That's why this works. We stood in our living room, the very same room where I'd confronted Evelyn years prior, where FCIB agents had arrested a federal criminal, where one life had ended and another had, painfully but surely, begun. But it felt different now. The poison was gone. The lies were buried. And the people who remained were bound together by choice rather than obligation, a much stronger connection. Miles, Eliza said quietly, her voice thoughtful. Do you ever regret how things ended with Evelyn? I thought about that question, the same one Agent Vance had asked me years ago, the one that lingered. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally, the words a quiet truth. I regret that the woman I married chose to become someone I couldn't recognize, someone I couldn't trust. But I don't regret protecting Chloe. I don't regret seeking justice. And I don't regret the life we've built from the ashes of what came before. Good, Eliza said, her smile broadening. Because this is a pretty amazing life, Miles. She was right. Standing in that room with the woman I loved, knowing that upstairs slept a daughter who felt safe and cherished, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I realized that sometimes destruction is just the first painful step toward building something immeasurably better, something more authentic. Evelyn had tried to take everything from me: my marriage, my child, my career, my very freedom. Instead, she'd unwittingly given me the chance to become the man I was meant to be. The man who could recognize threats and eliminate them with surgical precision. The man who could choose justice over mercy when the stakes were high enough to demand it. The man who could build a family based on unwavering truth instead of insidious lies. Outside, Northwood City sparkled in the autumn night, full of life and boundless possibility. Inside, my family slept peacefully, protected by systems I'd built and choices I'd made. I'd won the war, paid the steep price, and truly earned the peace. Some victories I knew now were worth any cost. This was one of them.